Hello. Today, I'd like to talk about the future of Asia, the Asian economy in 2050. The question is, what the Asian economy will look like by 2050. And there are a number of scenarios about the future of Asia, and the Asian Development Bank presented these two scenarios, optimistic one and not so optimistic one. The optimistic one is called the Asian Century Scenario, which goes something like this. Right now, in 2014, Asian economy will have about 16 to 17 trillion dollars in total GDP, which will be growing at a very fast rate. And it will hit the 150 trillion dollar mark by 2050. And then the Asia will become the dominant leading region in the world, and more than half of the world growth will be explained by Asian growth, particularly Asia 7, that is China, India, Indonesia, Japan, South Korea, Malaysia, and Thailand. That's a very optimistic scenario. But not so optimistic scenario is called the middle income trap hypothesis or scenario. That is something like most of the Asian economies will be growing at a modest rate, but somewhere along this line, those countries will be trapped in the so-called middle income range, and due to the internal problems, they couldn't grow even further, and therefore the total GDP for the whole Asian region will hit around $60 trillion, which is less than half of the GDP level in the Asian Century Scenario by 2050. This middle income trap is due to the internal problems such as income inequalities, ineffective and corrupt governments, and most of all, aging issue, which is already a big problem in certain countries, some countries like Japan, and soon in China. All right? So there are two scenarios. Now there is the third scenario, which is worse than the middle income trap scenario. That may be called the troubled region scenario. Here there will be ungoverned and divided country, region, or the whole world. Sounds very serious. Huh? Each country will face lack of governance, and country could be divided into two camps or more. For example, Thailand right now is facing the divided country problem already due to the lack of governance. China could be at risk when the one-party rule collapses in the future. Second, whole Asian region could become ungoverned or divided. Already there are several territorial disputes among Asian nations, as we know, China versus Japan, and China versus some Southeast Asian countries. And those disputes could become worse to divide the whole region into pieces. The third scenario, the third one, problem is the world ungoverned and divided. Well, in this case, certainly China could be the dominant power in the Pacific, whereas the United States will be determined to stay in the Asian Pacific region. And China and the US could be at conflict in terms of the economy and the strategic and military aspects. So the whole world will be divided in that way around Asia, and that will keep Asia from growing further. So this is the worst scenario. So I just presented the three possible scenarios. First, most optimistic, Asian-centric scenario. The second, less optimistic one, the middle-income trap hypothesis. And third one, most pessimistic, the troubled region hypothesis or the scenario. So, which one is most probable or likely? It's up to you to decide. So that's about the future of Asia.